Hafade, and welcome back. We had a recess from, this is the 8:30 a.m. Public hearing, but we recessed until 10 a.m. due to the traffic issue that we're experiencing. But thank goodness things are clearing up, so we're back on track now at 10 a.m. So buenas and Hafade, this public hearing is now called to order, and the time now is 10:03 a.m. Wednesday, October 15th, 2025. This hearing is conducted by myself, Senator Telo Taitague, Chairwoman of the Committee on Economic Investment, Military Buildup, Regional Relations, Technology, Regulatory Affairs, Justice, Election, and Retirement. To comply to the open government law, notices of this hearing was disseminated to all senators and media via email and published in KUAM on Wednesday, October 8, 2025, and a second notice on Monday, October 13, 2025. Notice of this hearing was also available on the Guam Legislative website and the Government of Guam public portal. I would like to recognize those who are in person and those watching from home. Welcome to your Guam legislature. I would also like to welcome my colleague who's here joining me today, Senator Parkinson. Thank you so much for being here, sir. I know it was tough for everybody getting here at 8:30, so I'm glad we all made it here. Colleagues, a copy of the legislation and documents was received ahead of time of this hearing, and you can access through the Google Drive link, which was emailed to you in advance. For the listening public, you can find the legislation on the Guam Legislature's website and the at guamlegislature.gov. And if you need assistance, please feel free to call the Guam Legislature at 671-472-3465. But before we begin, I would like to set some rules of engagement during this public hearing. When you speak, please make sure you speak directly into the microphone. And for the record, please state your name and position, who you represent. I ask that those who are testifying today to stay seated for any questions your colleagues may have, and then you will be excused. I respectfully ask that we conduct ourselves professionally and respect each other's opinion. Those individuals who do not comply to these rules will be removed from the room and prohibited from further participation. Let's all put our phones on vibrate as we move forward. I just did myself, so no worries. Okay, the following bills on the agenda this morning is Bill 167-38 COR, introduced by Senator Frank Blas Jr., an act to amend 3470F and 3470 of Chapter 34, Title 9, Guam Code Annotated, relative to increasing the penalties for graffiti violation in public and private property. Then we have Bill 171-38 COR, which is introduced by Senator Will Parkinson. It's an act to add a new Chapter 28A to Title 9 Guam Code Annotated, to add a new paragraph 12 to 25.10A, and to add a new 25.5 to Chapter 25 Title 9 Guam Code Annotated, and to add a new Article 7 to Chapter 24 Title 7 Guam Code Annotated, relative to prohibiting the creation, possession, disclosure, or threatened disclosure of non-consensual intimate deceptions, whether authentic or technologically implemented or manipulated, in other words, parentheses, DEEPFAKES, and to provide criminal penalties for civil remedies, forfeiture, victim privacy, safeguards, and expended jurisdictions. At this point, I will first do the first bill that was introduced by our speaker, good speaker, Speaker Blas. He is not here today and had asked me to do his opening remarks and also take in questions. He had a prior engagement that he could not miss. So I'm going to go ahead and provide his introduction of Bill 167. Okay. Okay. Senator Blas states that I, before you, introduce this measure, not of frustration alone, but out of deep sense of duty to preserve and protect the integrity, safety, and beauty of our island community. Bill 167 addresses a problem that has become far too common across Guam, the defacing of both public and private property through graffiti. While some may consider graffiti a form of expression, we must draw a clear line between art and vandalism, between creativity and criminal destruction. The bill seeks to amend existing law by increasing the penalties for those who chose to deface our community with graffiti. Especially, it strengthens the consequences outlined in subsection 34-70F and 34-70I of Chapter 34, Title 9 of Guam Code Annotated. By increasing fines, this legislation aims to not only deter would-be offenders, but also ensure that those who damage our island are held accountable in a way that benefits the community. So why is this bill necessary? Because time and again, we've seen schools, bus stops, utility boxes, and private homes tagged with markings that not only lower property values, but also create an atmosphere of neglect and lawlessness. We see that hard work that community organizations put into cleaning and painting bus stop shelters be wasted when graffiti goes up almost immediately. After when graffiti goes unchecked, it sends a message that we tolerate degraded or surroundings and believe that message is unacceptable. This legislation is not just about punishment. It's about restoring pride in our neighbors, respecting private property, and keeping our public spaces safe and clean. It is about sending a clear signal: Guam will not be a canvas for crime. I introduced this bill with the belief that every person deserves to live in a community that reflects the beauty, culture, and respect that we all are known for. But legislation alone cannot solve this problem. That's why I'm asking today for the support not only of my colleagues in this chamber, but also of every resident of Guam, students, parents, teachers, businesses, and community leaders. Let's work together to educate our youth, report violations when we see them, and support programs that encourage creative expression in the right places, like murals, art festivals, and school art initiatives. In closing, I respectfully ask for the support of Bill 167-38, and let's take this step forward together to strengthen our laws, protect our properties, and uphold the dignity of our island. Let's keep Guam clean. Let's keep Guam beautiful. And let's do it together. This bill received additional information before we start the taking questions. Let me pull this up. So, Bill 167-38 received a fiscal note on, what's going on with my computer? Okay. And I believe it was, let me get the date on that. So on July 18, 2025, it received a fiscal note. The Bureau had sought input on the proposed Bill 62-38 from the office. Okay, they have the wrong date, which I'm going to have to concur with. BBMR is mentioning Bill 62-38, but we're actually at Bill 167-38. So I'm going to have to ask the Attorney General's office to concur on their comments later on as I bring them up to testify. Our legal counsel also reviewed by legal counsel with no recommendations or changes at this time for any amendments. We invited to this public hearing Office of Attorney General, Judiciary of Guam, Mayor's Council, Department of Education, Department of Youth Affairs, and Guam Visitors Bureau. Okay, and at this time, we have signed up to testify on this bill. Is Attorney Lee Miller from the Office of Attorney General, if you can please step forward. We also have Joe Taitague from the PDN. Okay, you didn't sign up? You signed it? Okay, no worries. Okay. Okay, so at this point, Attorney Miller, Thank you for coming and readjusting your schedule to meet this 10 o'clock. And I do apologize for what happened earlier, but it was unforeseeable.
Of course.
And I will now allow you to provide your testimony, but then, and then I will ask you about the BBMR's report. Okay? Okay, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members, and Hafa. This testimony is submitted by the Attorney General of Guam on behalf of our client, the people of Guam, in support of Bill number 167-38 COR, which seeks to amend Guam's law to add stronger penalties for graffiti on public and private lands. Graffiti is not simply a cosmetic issue. It is a crime that erodes our people's quality of life and undermines respect for the law and property. Wherever we go, whether on Guam or around the world, we instinctively judge a community by how well it maintains its public and private spaces. Streets, schools, government buildings, and neighborhoods covered in graffiti signal disorder and neglect. Tourists notice it too, and it affects how they experience our island. Graffiti degrades our quality of life, sends a bad message to our children, and harms our fragile tourism engine. Laws that intend to deter such bad conduct must be strong enough to make graffiti artists think twice out of fear or respect for others' property. We all want Guam to be an environment that we as residents can be proud of and happy to show off to visitors from across the ocean. Eliminating graffiti is an important part of maintaining and improving Guam's image to the world. Defacing public or private property is a deliberate act of criminal mischief. It is time-consuming, costly to remove, and chips away at the sense of safety and pride in our community. This Attorney General and my prosecutors strongly support this legislation that strengthens penalties for graffiti and holds offenders and, where appropriate, their parents fully accountable. Bad acts must equal bad consequences. Accountability is an essential life lesson. Youth who see that reckless actions carry real legal consequences learn the value of responsibility, respect, and lawfulness which they carry into adulthood. We also urge the legislature to dedicate a portion of collected fines and penalties to fund a rapid response graffiti removal program on government property. Public spaces, especially bus stops, schools, and community village centers, must be kept clean and send a clear message with your support. This democratically elected Attorney General and our client, the people of Guam, will enforce the law, will protect property, and will refuse to tolerate vandalism. Quick removal of these tags demonstrate that law and order are priorities, that the community cares about its surroundings, and that Guam is a place both residents and tourists can be proud of. At the same time, we encourage providing a place to proudly display art by youth. Programs such as youth mural competitions and sanctioned public art projects allow creativity to flourish within the bounds of the law. The goal is not to stifle art, but to ensure that respect for others' property, civility, and Guam's reputation are not compromised. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this legislation.
Sujusmasi, Attorney Miller, for your testimony. And I quite agree with the work that you're doing at the Attorney General's office with regards to justice being served and quickly done so. And I appreciate that not only when you provide testimony, you provide also another alternative solution to tackle it. And it's the rapid response graffiti removal program on government property. That sounds like an excellent idea. I'm pretty sure the author of this legislation might, consider taking the next step. And there's one thing putting laws together, but there's another to also, to enforce it, as well as to try and find other ways to avoid it, from happening. It's not all let's go and take them down. It's finding programs such as what you suggested here that would also be of assistance to the public too as well. As I mentioned earlier, BBMR sent a testimony in with regards to their fiscal note. It said the Bureau had sought input on the proposed bill of 162, but obviously it's not 162 from the Office of Attorney General, so maybe that's why they didn't receive anything from your office. Makes sense. I just wanted to continue to read. If enacted, the Bureau lacks the necessary information such as number of individuals found guilty and the number of graffiti offenses per location to determine estimated amount of revenue that would be generated through fines imposed. Additionally, the Bureau is of the opinion that there will be a potential impact to the Department of Correction relative to the incarceration-specific costs, such as costs for meals, health care, clothing, and other associated costs, and serve for a longer imprisonment term. I mean, if we had that excuse for everything, then nobody would be going to jail. But fortunately, if you do the crime, you know, you do the time. So that being said, I'm going to open it up to my colleague. If you have any questions, Senator Parkinson, you are now recognized, sir. Thank you so much. Attorney Milley, again, I apologize for the delay in public hearing and taking up your precious time, and you may be excused, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Members.
Okay, you're very welcome, sir. Okay, and at this time, I would just like to do the closing for Speaker Blas. This is his bill. And in his closing, of course, he thanks us for holding today's public hearing and for graciously introducing the bill for him on his behalf. I also want to express my deep appreciation to those who took the time to submit testimony. We also, by the way, received testimony from Judiciary of Guam, for the record. And with respect to 167, the measure addresses policy matters that fall within the preview of the legislative branch. While the judiciary will continue to review the bill, we do not anticipate a significant operational impact and will defer to the outcome of the legislative process. So we did hear from the judiciary. As we close, I want to offer a sincere hope that one day bills like this will no longer be necessary, that the people who call Guam home will take pride in living in a place as beautiful and unique as ours, a true paradise, and treat it with the care and respect it deserves. But until that time comes, we must do what we can to protect our community. Bill 167 is one of those steps. It's a tool meant to support our law-abiding citizens and to send a clear message that we will not tolerate the defacement of our island. I respectfully call on my colleagues in the legislature to support this measure. And again, thanks to all who contributed to today's dialogue. And I look forward to any market meetings and to working collaboratively to see this bill move forward. Si Diyos Masi. And that is from Speaker Blas, the author of Bill 167-38 COR. And now that we have heard that, I'll consider that this bill has been publicly heard, and we will move on to the next bill, which is Bill 171-38, and I'd like to recognize the author of this legislation, Senator Will Parkinson. You are now recognized, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for everyone that came today. I would like to thank Senator Shelley Calvo as well for co-sponsoring this measure, and to you, Senator Taitague, for holding this important public hearing. There was a moment after the U.S. Congress removed the provision in the big, beautiful budget that would have prevented state and territory governments from regulating AI, that I considered the opening and the opportunity to introduce Bill number 171-38. And it was done with one clear goal in mind: to protect our people, especially our children, from the newest frontier of sexual exploitation, AI-generated deepfake abuse. This legislation, the Non-Consensual Intimate Depictions Act of 2025, modernizes Guam's criminal and civil codes to respond to a danger that didn't even exist even a few years ago. Advances in artificial intelligence now allow bad actors to take an innocent photo, often pulled from social media, and turn it into pornographic images that look horrifyingly real. These images are then shared, traded, and used for extortion. And though the image may be fake, the trauma is absolutely real. While anyone can be a target of deepfake sexual abuse, statistics show that young people, especially young girls and women, are disproportionately victimized. Easy-to-use apps can undress an image with a single click, transforming an innocent selfie or a school yearbook photo into a realistic-looking nude. In Australia, authorities have declared deepfake abuse a current crisis affecting school communities. Free Nudify apps and AI tools are being used by students to generate fake, explicit images of classmates, leading to a devastated reputations and entire schools thrown into turmoil. In South Korea, the problem has reached epidemic proportions among youth. Authorities there reported 513 deepfake pornography cases under investigation as of late 2024, a 70% spike in just 40 days. Startlingly, nearly 2/3 of the victims were teenagers, some as young as middle school, and minors made up 79% of the offenders identified in one recent year. Despite the severity of harm, deepfake sexual exploitation has often slipped through legal loopholes. Many existing laws against image-based sexual abuse, like revenge porn statutes, were written before AI face swap tools existed. These laws typically criminalize sharing authentic images without consent. For example, a real photo taken of a victim. But they often fail to account for manipulated images. If a perpetrator pastes a victim's face onto a pornographic image that the victim never actually took, some outdated statutes don't clearly apply, because technically, the explicit body in the photo was not the victim's real body. Such gaps have allowed offenders to argue that no crime was committed since the image was fabricated. Bill 171-38 closes that gap. It criminalizes the creation, possession, or sharing of non-consensual intimate depictions, whether authentic or digitally manipulated. It creates felony penalties for offenders, civil remedies for victims, and privacy safeguards that allow survivors to seek justice without having to expose themselves to further humiliation. This bill was written in collaboration with RAIN, the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, the nation's largest anti-sexual violence organization. RAIN has expressed strong support for this bill and commended Guam for standing with survivors. This issue may be born of cutting-edge technology, but at its core, it is about the age-old values of safety, privacy, and dignity. This legislature has a duty to ensure that our laws keep pace with our technology, that our compassion for victims evolves alongside the tools for those who would harm them. With this bill, Guam can once again protect our people in affirming the simple truth that consent still matters, even in the digital age. With that, I yield the rest of my time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're very welcome, Senator Parkinson. And just for the listening audience, we received a letter from BBMR, and it states, based on the comments received on Bill 171-3, the Office of Attorney General has stated that the bill has no fiscal impact as such, and the bill is determined to be administrative in nature and poses no fiscal impact upon any funds of the government of Guam. We have also had the bill reviewed by our legal counsel, and there are no recommendations and changes and amendments at this time from legal counsels. The invitees that we invited to this public hearing is the Office of the Attorney General, which we found that they will be providing written testimony. We received a testimony for Judiciary of Guam. Again, into the record, I will read what they wrote. For Judiciary of Guam, they said, they reiterate the name of the bill. Regarding Bill 171-38, the judiciary continues its review. We do respectfully note that the courts presently provide mechanisms for protecting privacy interests in appropriate cases. Upon a party's motion, including the use as well as the sealing of restrictions of court records. To this end, certain provisions of the bill may duplicate existing procedures. Citizens is what it meant, including those for citizens, as well as the sealing and restrictions of court records. Okay. To this end, certain provisions of this bill may be duplicated existing procedures. That was from the Judiciary of Guam. Also, we asked the Guam Bar Association, Department of Youth Affairs, the Women's Bureau of Women's Affairs, and Jane Flores is here, the director. You can step forward, please, and be ready for your testimony. We also called the Department of Education, the Guam Community College, Victims Advocate Reaching Out, Guam Coalition Against Sexual Assault and Family Violence, Guam Sexual Assault and Abuse Resource Center Association, Inafamaulik Coalition, Guam Gumamami Inc., University of Guam Violence Against Women Prevention Programs, Catholic Social Service, Bethel Church Association, Naval Base Guam Sexual Assault Response, or SAPR Office, Guam National Guard Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Office, Anderson Air Force Base Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Office. We've called several individuals, and hopefully, I'm not sure if it's due to this morning's issue on traffic, but and our rescheduling to 10 a.m., but I'm hoping that we will get a response from all these individuals to provide testimony, those who are definitely impacted or have been in situations where they've been impacted from. And at this time, thank you to the Director of the Women's Bureau for being here today and present to testify. You are now recognized. And please state your name for the record and your department. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Taitague and Senator Parkinson. My name is Jane Flores. I'm Director of the Bureau of Women's Affairs. Hafaday to you, Senator Taitague and Senator Parkinson. The Bureau of Women's Affairs supports Bill 171-38. This important piece of legislation will provide additional safeguards to anyone whose facial or bodily image is attached to any digitally created intimate image or sexually explicit act and then distributed over social media or any medium. Such actions are tremendously harmful and can cause immense psychological damage to a person, especially an underage individual. Bill 171-38 closes an important loophole that unsavory characters might try to use in order to claim that, quote, no harm was actually done to a person in generating and or disseminating such digitally created images. But we know that this is not true. The Bureau of Women's Affairs receives grants from the U.S. Department of Justice Office of Violence Against Women to provide services for victims of domestic and dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, and human trafficking. With passage of this bill, our services will now be able to include persons who are victims of digital crimes as well. The psychological damage to a person whose reputation is tainted or threatened by dissemination of these so-called deepfake images, or who may be blackmailed by such created images, is such that it can cause myriad problems for the person or worse. Guam is already dealing with an alarming number of suicide rates among young people on our island. OVW has just also released a notice of funding opportunity for fiscal year 2025 local law enforcement grants for enforcement of cybercrimes program, which supports efforts to prevent, enforce, and prosecute cybercrimes against individuals with a focus on adult and young adult cybercrime victims. Cybercrimes against individuals are defined as criminal offenses that involve the use of a computer to harass, threaten, stalk, extort, coerce, cause fear to, or intimidate an individual, or without consent distribute images of an adult, except that the use of computers need not be an element of the offense or of the offense. I have sent Senator Parkinson and Calvo, the bill's authors, the notice of funding opportunity so that they may review it for any additional information that can strengthen this legislation in order to help prevent these crimes from happening to our people, especially our young people who are more vulnerable to these types of crimes. BWA is especially encouraged to see the inclusion of Section 4, which adds that any person who knowingly possesses or disseminates a manipulated child sexual depiction as defined in subsection 25.10A12 shall be punished in the same manner as for possession or dissemination of authentic child sexual abuse material under applicable Guam law. Any person who would attempt this type of action should be punished to the fullest extent of the law, and this bill helps to do that. The Bureau of Women's Affairs urges the passage of Bill 17138, and we thank Senator Parkinson and Senator Calvo for sponsoring this important piece of legislation. Sejus Masi.
Thank you, Director. Before I turn it over to the author of the bill, I do have some questions with regards to what the judiciary of Guam had mentioned earlier that you might know, since you mentioned in your testimony about a grant opportunity here. And when the courts mentioned that, we do respectfully note that the courts presently provide mechanisms for protecting privacy interests in appropriate cases upon parties' motion, including the use of pseudonym, as well as sealing and restricting of court records. To this end, certain provisions of the bill certain provisions of this bill may duplicate existing procedures. Is there anything in your book, since obviously whenever going after a grant, you definitely have to have that know-how or what's available or some of the causes or the current laws that are in place. Can you talk a little bit on this, what you know that is currently in judicial, in the law?
Well, I do know that everyone who receives grants has to have a policy to redact personally identifiable information when they are submitting data or submitting information about a case or a grant to justify the funding. And what I'm assuming, and I don't know this for sure, but in the judiciary, for young victims, with regard to publicizing any kind of information about the adjudication of the crime, that you do have to redact any type of personally identifiable information with regard to a victim, so that, and that's what I'm assuming that they may know, is that I believe the bill has information in it with regard to protecting the identity of the victim when you're going after the perpetrator. And that is already the case, I believe, with regard to the adjudication of these types of crimes. Because I know that for us, we have to have those policies in place, and I know the court does as well.
Have you been in any situations where, there was somebody who had that happen to them and wanted to seek help, and have you been in any situations like that? I mean, you're going after
Yeah.
a grant, so.
Right. Well, you know, going after the grants, we do the funding, so we just collect the data from the people that actually provide the services. So that might be a question that you would ask to Vero, because they deal directly with the victims. We hear about situations with victims, but when they tell us of situations, they never tell us who the victim is.
Okay, I see. And that's why we reached out to all these nonprofit organizations that deal with things like this, and hopefully we can get some more input from them, at least give us data, you know, to back up, you know, legislation like this. It always needs that. And I'm sure that that data that you received in order to get a grant, did you receive any of that data?
We usually just receive numbers.
And what are those numbers?
I don't have any in front of me right now. Sorry, I didn't bring them.
Okay,
but-
yeah, and maybe you might want to do a supplemental,
Okay.
you know, testimony, so that when we do have in the markup meeting, we have that to back us up, you know, on the markup meeting. So if you can submit those numbers that you received, that would be very helpful. So that was just one question I have, and I'll allow the author to, since there's no one else here, to open and close on your bill. So you are now recognized, Senator Parkinson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you for your testimony, ma'am. I don't really have any questions other than how can I further help the cause and make sure that our people are protected from these incredible new tools at our disposal. But like any tools, tools can be abused and used for nefarious purposes, and it's not the fault of the tools, but the fault of the people that use it. It's important for us as a society to recognize that. I think about this problem, and it feels like it's something out of a dystopian nightmare.
It does.
Really does. And I can't imagine the feelings that people go through who are victims of a crime like this, because it's not even something you did. It's not even something you did. Somebody could be living their life, doing everything right, and still found a way to be victimized. And that just, it's deeply troubling to me. It's deeply troubling to me that this is a crime that happens primarily from our youth, and a very significant portion of the perpetrators of this crime are the youth as well. And I don't know what to do about that. In the last legislature, in the 37th, we had to legislate against youth committing crimes against youth, and I couldn't believe we were in this place. But in my research for this bill and seeing other jurisdictions suffering from this problem, it's appalling. It's appalling the damage it does to people's reputations and their lives. It's appalling that people are using this to sexually extort vulnerable people. Do what I want you to do, or I'm going to share these completely fabricated pictures of you. That's horrifying.
Yes, it is.
For people who are a little bit older than myself, of my age, you know, I come from the millennial generation of the world. And we were kind of the last generation. We kind of got to have a childhood without the computer being there from womb to tomb. You know, many of us, it came in during late elementary or middle school. So we had time to have our mental development and our social bonds be built without a tool of social media. But now we have entire generations who have known nothing but the social media world. And we don't know what that does to people's development, to have their identity tied up in such an external force, such a powerful external force that way. And we are exacerbating that problem with crimes like completely fabricating sexually exploitative material and sharing it to tar and feather and exploit each other. And I don't know what kind of sickness in the heart of humans it is that allows us to do such heinous things. But it is incumbent on us in positions of responsibility and authority to prevent and stop it if we can. We've seen the statistics in South Korea, in the Philippines, in the places all around us, how much of a growing problem it's being. Let's start tackling the problem now before it comes to our shores in full force. These trends tend to spread, and they spread faster and faster in a globalized world as these tools become easier to access and more sophisticated at almost a daily rate. Soon these problems will come to us. We need to have more compassion in our hearts to solve these problems before they happen to us. I do not need to wait for a video of me showing up on TikTok for me to care about this issue. We need to care about this issue now. Because reputational harm is one of those things that people spend a long time building up reputations in their community, among their peers, among their social group. And it's so easy to tear it down. And using fabricated artificial intelligence videos to do it is just so beyond the pale. And so I want to take a stand against these tools and the people that would use these tools in such a way. There is a lot that will come positive from the technological revolution that we are currently witnessing before us. But there will be some harms as well. And it will be incumbent on us to be ever vigilant of those harms. So with that, Madam Chair, thank you for holding this hearing, and I ask my colleagues to support this legislation.
Thank you, Senator. I do have a couple comments I would like to make actually toward the end of this. As we do a markup meeting, it's very important to understand that currently there are no laws in Guam which specifically criminalize the non-consensual distribution of digitally manipulated image by artificial intelligence or their digital image. Or digital means. There are currently laws which protect survivors of sexual abuse and prohibit the non-consensual sharing of sexually explicit and intimate images in Title VII, Chapter 53 of Guam Code Annotated, which defines an intimate image as a photograph, film, video recording, or other similar mediums that show uncovered genitals, public areas, etc., female post, all those, and somebody who has no clothes on, actually, so it can be argued that AI or digitally forged images would fall under this category, but there is nothing in this chapter that explicitly prohibits images generated by AI or machine learning, since the technology did not exist at the time. Deepfake porn laws in CNMI. In 2021, a bill was introduced criminalizing the non-consensual distribution of private sexual images. However, it cannot be located online. At this time, I couldn't locate it, and I could not find confirmation if this bill had passed or not. But it was something that CNMI also have been addressing. There is no fiscal impact to this legislation. However, as of June 2025, there are laws that prohibit the sharing of non-consensual, as I mentioned earlier. However, actually, it's across all states and some territories on local legislative levels as well as federal levels. However, not all states have laws explicitly on the creation or distribution of pornographic images and videos. phonographic images and videos generated by artificial intelligence, and the federal level and the law which pertains to them known as Take It Down. It's an act that has yet to be signed into law by President Trump. That being said, much of this bill intends to do is already cover what's in Chapter 24 and 53 of Title VII Guam Code Annotated. It would be better to amend these chapters instead of creating a new chapter article and paragraphs across the chapters in Title 7 and 9 of GCA. So the question is, if non-consensual deepfake or digital forgery is posted online, there is no language in Bill 171-38 mandating the site or service to remove and delete. And would it be possible to include this into the bill? Now, I bring up these situations because when we go into market meeting, whatever was brought up during the public hearings, we can incorporate it in. But it does seem that it might be, some of the stuff that we can keep in 171-38 move forward. But it's important that we also address other chapters, which can be a separate bill later on. And I've introduced legislation, AI task force, and this is some of the areas in which subcommittees of our task force will be looking into to make sure that we follow through with what is happening in the US, what is other states and territories doing about it, and where are the options, like grants, for this task force to look after, to find funding, as Director of Women's Bureau has mentioned. And while this bill was written in good intentions and exclusively focused on the use of AI and machine learning technology and potential tools in sexual abuse, a separate bill may be necessary. But Bill 171-38 have some areas in there that we can address. And we will seek legal advice whether we can put other chapters into this bill if it's not been in this bill. So other than that, I would like to call this bill as being heard in this public hearing. And that being said, Bill 171-38 has been heard. And at this time, I'd like to do my closing, which you're very welcome to. You're excused, Director Flores. So, in closing, there are no further questions or comments. This concludes our discussion on Bill both 171-38 and 167-38. And we will continue to receive comments for these bills and seek, those who were not here today. I continue to work with the author of the legislation on 171 to get those individuals to come to provide more testimony. My office will continue to accept these written testimonies on today's hearing for 5 business days from today, which will be mailed to my office at 238 Archbishop Flores, Suite 407 of the DNA Building in Hagåtña. You may also send your written testimony to my office via email at senatortelot@gmail.com. Thank you all for your participation and create a great day. The time now is 10:50 a.m. in the morning. This public hearing is now adjourned. Si Diyos masi.